I'm in the European Parliament here in Brussels on the day that the MEPs are going to be voting for the Brexit withdrawal agreement. I'm joined by Fianna Fáil MEP Billy Kelleher from Ireland South. Billy, you're very welcome. This is a momentous day. The MEPs are going to sign off on the Brexit withdrawal agreement.
Yes, indeed, it's a momentous day. It's an emotional day for many people who are very pro-European and passionate about that concept and about that belief that Europe together is stronger. But clearly the will of the British people must be respected, and we will vote today to allow the withdrawal agreement to pass. It's the last stage in the process, and at 11 o'clock on Friday, the 31st of January, well then the British will no longer be members of the European Union.
Now, you expressed concerns about voting for the Brexit withdrawal agreement because of concerns over citizens' rights. We spoke about this during the plenary session in Strasbourg earlier this month. Have those fears been allayed for you now, and are you going to vote for this agreement?
Well, they haven't been allayed to the point where you'd like to see a definitive guarantee in terms of citizens' rights. And it's not just in the context of the withdrawal agreement, it's about what will happen after the withdrawal agreement. That's where my concerns really reside. So up until the 31st of December 2020, well then citizens' rights will be protected. But it is beyond that, in the future relationship. How will Britain view European citizens living in Northern Ireland, for example, in relationships with Irish citizens? These are key questions, and nobody's answered them so far.
So you haven't got those concerns addressed?
I haven't, but they're not in the context of the withdrawal agreement. So what I did, and a politician or
but
a
citizens' rights are part of the Brexit deal.
They are, and beyond the Brexit deal, there will have to be further negotiations around citizens' rights. I don't think we can just park citizens' rights up to the 31st of December 2020 and thereafter trust the British government to ensure that Irish citizens' rights are protected. And even if you look at the D'Souza case in recent years, that in itself shows that the Home Office in particular in Britain is not very supportive of the Good Friday Agreement, not very supportive of the provisions within the Good Friday Agreement around dual nationality and about single nationality. In other words, people identifying as Irish citizens. And my concern really, Karen, was around the issue of an Irish citizen in a relationship with a European citizen. Up until the 31st of December 2020, they will be able to reside in the north and live normally. After that, they will have to get permission from the UK Home Office to work in Northern Ireland.
But you expressed the same concerns about this situation last time round, and you have said that you wouldn't vote for the Brexit withdrawal agreement until these were resolved. Now, it sounds to me they're not resolved, but are you going to vote for the agreement today?
Well, what I said was that I had grave concerns around citizens' rights. Those concerns into the future haven't been resolved, but I think what I've tried to do was get this particular issue up the agenda. Guy Verhofstadt, the parliamentary negotiator on the Brexit team, went to the UK, met with Stephen Barclay, the British Minister for Brexit, and outlined some of those concerns. So while we have got, I suppose, commitments, we still have to ensure that the Irish government and the European Union, in terms of negotiations into the future relationship, will defend these particular issues around citizens' rights. We can't just have citizens having full rights up until the end of this year and thereafter uncertainty. So that's what I hope, whatever government comes into being after the general election in Ireland, that they will certainly make the Good Friday Agreement and the provisions and the spirit of the Good Friday Agreement an integral part of any future discussions.
But are you going to vote for the Brexit withdrawal agreement today? Yes or no?
Yes, yes, I mean I am, and I said to you the last time that we spoke that look, more than likely I would have to vote for it. It's a Hobson's choice. Voting against Brexit will not stop Brexit. If you vote against Brexit, you ensure that there is a hard Brexit. I don't want a hard Brexit, but what I wanted to do was to bring this to the fore, and I hope, and I sincerely hope, that the European Union negotiators, the Irish government that will be elected on the 8th of February, will ensure that Northern Ireland and citizens' rights in Northern Ireland are an integral part of any future relationship. So it's not just about trade, it's about trade and citizens' rights, and they have to be fundamental into the future.
What do you think will be the impact on the European Parliament, the European Commission, the EU 27 bloc as a whole now that Britain will effectively, it's from Friday evening, be out of the EU?
Well, to change the dynamic, there's no doubt about that. I mean, when Britain leaves, Ireland will be the only English-speaking country in the European Union. We will have lost an ally in many of the political positions that we took over the years in terms of our view of Europe, in terms of how we view the economy and society, how we fund investment, and just our outlook in the world was similar in many times to Britain's view. So we will have lost an ally in that context. Clearly, the big issue now will be around the trade negotiations, and we'll have to be very vigilant. As a country, we'll have to be exceptionally vigilant. The UK exports about nearly 50% of its products into the European Union, and the European Union exports nearly 6% into the UK. So there's a huge disparity in terms of trade figures. And I just hope that we don't start to end up with certain sections of trade being negotiated and hived off that could have a damaging effect. Take, for example, fisheries. Fisheries will be fundamental in terms of the discussions around trade. And if it's badly thought out, and if the Europeans concede, for example, on fishing, well, it could have a detrimental impact on Irish fishing.
And what about just the reality of getting a trade deal finalised by the end of December? Is that just completely unrealistic? Because the British are still insisting that that has to be done.
Well, look, I mean, they're going to negotiations, so obviously they're going to have to try and force a deadline. But let's be honest, I mean, we're starting from a position of convergence. So it's an unusual trade deal. Normally you are starting from positions of divergence, and the trade deal is trying to bring you together. This is a trade deal that's trying to facilitate people growing apart, which is a very unusual way of starting a trade deal. I hope that we don't end up either the European Union trying to be triumphalist and trying to win in the context of the trade deal to show that Britain made a strategic mistake in leaving the European Union. And equally, the UK has to understand that it can't just threaten, that there will be a no deal, that it could have a cataclysmic effect on the island of Ireland, that it could undermine the peace process. The British can't be using Ireland as leverage. They can't be using the peace process as leverage. They can't be using citizens' rights in Northern Ireland as leverage. So we have to have a very mature debate about this. But the next Irish government will have to be vigilant, because we don't want to see sections of the economy being negotiated in individual phases. We want to ensure, can we work together to ensure that we can keep all the trade aspects in one unified trade agreement. It can't happen in full detail, in my view, before the 31st of December of this year. There may be some basic trade agreement, but looking beyond that, if Britain decides to diverge in standards, both in employment and environment, in state aid, well then clearly it's going to be a protracted negotiation.
There were 73 British MEP seats, but one, Alan Smith, the Scottish SNP, was elected to the Scottish Parliament, so that seat is vacant. So 72 British MEPs will be leaving on Friday. They have already packing their bags. I heard from one British MEP that I think people were already looking at into the office because they're going to take it over. What is the feeling on your corridors? You're with the Renew group now. The Brexit Party are not in your group, so you have British MEPs who would be Remainers. What's the feeling in the corridors around your areas?
Well, I actually share a corridor with the Liberal Democrats, the Lib Dems, and they're very passionate pro-European. Clearly, all the MEPs are going home. Their staff are going home. So it's quite an emotional journey for them, in the sense that they've lost what they passionately believe in terms of UK membership within the European Union. But you just distill it down to human levels. People have lost their jobs. Some people have made Brussels their home. They no longer have security of tenure in terms of work. They may have to go back to the UK themselves. So there's lots of people who are working in the system here, working for MEPs, who working in the Commission, working in the Council, who will lose their jobs. So effectively they will be going home as well. So it's a very emotional day on many fronts. From my perspective, it's emotional because the UK is leaving what I believe in passionately, the European Union, and the impact that will have on my fellow citizens in Northern Ireland and elsewhere. And then beyond that, just when you see the human emotions of people just being torn away from people they've worked with for many years and having to head back to a country that is no longer going to be part of what they believe in.
And just finally, before we go, Billy, you know, it is extraordinary that the British, it's hard to believe that the British are finally going to be going, but I think Ireland is definitely going to be impacted on this because it's just been, as people were saying earlier in the show, an ally of Ireland and sometimes maybe not in everything. But what will be the challenges for Ireland to ensure that, you know, it can still retain its place in a very changing EU bloc now?
Well, I mean, the great thing about Ireland is it's flexible in terms of its ability to adapt to new circumstances. We will have to build new friendships in Europe. We can no longer depend on a big country like the UK having a similar view to ourselves, be it in the areas of taxation, be it in the areas of public expenditure, be it in areas that, you know, we would have had a similar outlook. So beyond that, I mean, we have to build alliances, and I mean, that's what MEPs do on a daily basis. That's what I do in my Renew group. That's what Fianna MEPs do in their group, and others and independents that represent Ireland here. So we just need to build alliances. I mean, the Hanseatic League is something that's spoken about. There's no doubt that is something that will assist Ireland. But I think that Ireland should beef up its diplomatic efforts, and it should also, I think, re-emphasise the importance of the Parliament. The Parliament is a great place to build alliances because politicians are good at that. And I just think that the Irish government, regardless of who they are, should put a greater emphasis on keeping links between the Irish government, the European Parliament, and using the European Parliament to build political alliances throughout Europe.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Billy Kelleher, thank you very much.